Chapter 5. The Walk. If there was any day that Maura didn't want to walk home, it was today. Just the thought of the scary Halloween costumes, darkened skies, and the freak incident in the bathroom was enough to put her on edge. As she looked upward, she noticed the sky was peppered with a plethora of gray clouds that varied in size and shape. It reminded her of childhood cartoons where clouds would hover above characters to represent their bad luck. She wondered if it was a metaphor for her actual life given her chaotic day. The rain had lifted, but the sky was still overcast, which suggested it would resume. Daylight savings time was in full effect because dusk had arrived. It was darker than usual and had been rainy all week because of the consistent thunderstorms. She reached for her umbrella, but remembered she left it in the bathroom. She pulled her hood over her head and took her chances with the rain. She still had one reason to smile. She met a guy that showed a genuine interest in her. He was smart, compassionate, and cute. She was excited to tell her sister, Rain, the marvelous news. Maura removed her unbroken compact mirror from her bag, but when she saw her messy hair and smeared makeup, she closed the compact and put it away. For a moment, she questioned how Edward found her attractive. It was not only her hair that bothered her. There was a small patch of discolored skin, about the size of a dime, above the left side of her lip. It happened during moments of high stress, and no matter how much skin lightening cream she used, she never replicated the even caramel skin tone she admired in her sister. She thought about calling a rideshare service or a cab, but the last time she used her mother's credit card for a ride home, it had erupted into a huge debacle, and she didn't want to shift the day back toward a negative trajectory. She was happy to be off that crowded bus and at one with her positive thoughts. It was not raining, and she had met Edward, and that was enough to keep her mind from drifting into the negative circumstances from earlier. She buttoned up her purple pea coat and walked home. Maura reached the end of the sidewalk, and a flash of lightning appeared across the sky. Booming thunder followed it. Its sound rattled windows and made some car alarms go off. It startled the neighborhood dogs and triggered incessant howling and loud barking. As Maura turned the corner onto the most populous street in her neighborhood, Franklin Avenue, legions of people paraded up and down the sidewalks. It was Halloween, and although it was wet outside, children were adamant and excited about trick-or-treating. It appeared everyone started early due to the current overcast weather. Parents held umbrellas over their children as they knocked on doors in the opulent neighborhood of Diamond Cove Estates, a suburb of Potomac, Maryland. Maura's splendid memories dissipated. Every ghost costume or evil demented mask was a perpetual trigger that forced her mind toward her bathroom encounter. Telling her parents was not an option because they would not believe her. She even questioned if her supportive sister would understand. A loud blaring horn caused Maura to jump and placed her hand against her heart. She looked to her left. Alongside her was a familiar vehicle driving at the pace at which she walked. The back window slowly rolled down, and a handsome man with a burgundy and gray tweed blazer hit the side of the vehicle with his hand to get her attention. "Maura Manning," Jackson called. Maura briefly examined the individual in the car. She checked the time on her cell phone and rolled her eyes at the man in the Range Rover and kept walking. "Young lady, I know I raised you better than that," Jackson replied. Maura inserted her earbuds into her ears and ignored the gentleman speaking to her. The SUV zoomed a few feet in front of her and parked. The driver, a short, pudgy man with light peach-colored skin, stepped out of the car and opened the back door of the Range Rover. Out stepped a tall man with a chocolate skin tone and tailor-made slacks. He dressed immaculately. His beard was trimmed, and his hair was freshly cut. He stood in front of Maura with his hands cupped against his body and motioned for her to get in the car. "Maura!" Jackson yelled. She stopped, took out her earbuds, and turned toward her father. "What?" she asked, annoyed. "Get in the car," he replied. Maura took off her hood and pointed to her hair and makeup. "This is your fault. If you had arrived promptly at 3 p.m., I wouldn't have bad hair and smeared makeup, Moira replied. Jackson and Moira were drawing a crowd as strangers stopped to watch their exchange. It made him uncomfortable. He loosened his tie and took a few steps closer toward his daughter. In the car now, countered Jackson. The increased volume and directness in his tone meant he was serious. Moira climbed in the back seat of the Range Rover, and he followed in after her. Sergio, the driver, closed the door and scurried over to the driver's side. He started the vehicle and pulled onto the road. I'm sorry for my tardiness. I had a session run longer than expected, Jackson stated. He unbuttoned his jacket, put on his reading glasses, and picked up the business section of the newspaper. You're sorry, all right, Moira replied. She folded her arms against her chest and blankly stared at the road. Jackson put down the paper and turned toward his daughter. I believe children should be able to express themselves, and that is why I allow you ample amount of latitude when speaking to me. But I will not tolerate public humiliation or disrespect. I have a reputation to uphold. If the world's #1 child psychiatrist cannot handle his own daughter, it not only affects my practice, but the incredible life that you live. Respect me when in public. Jackson picked back up his paper and opened up his right-side blazer pocket and took out a cigar and lighter. Moira snatched the cigar, rolled down the window, and threw it out of the car. Respect my lungs, Moira replied. Jackson gave his daughter an unapproving glance. How long are you going to fight, Moira? Jackson asked. Moira took out her book from her backpack and started reading. Her father snatched the book and threw it in the front seat. How about you respect our time? Jackson retorted. What time? Ever since Veronica got pregnant, you have no time, Moira countered. Jackson reached in his pocket and handed her a prescription bottle. Aggression is one of the side effects of your latest medication, so I changed your prescription. This one should calm your aggression and stop the nightmares your mother told me about, Jackson replied. She tells you everything. I wish she would keep some things to herself, and the medicine is not working, Moira replied. Are you taking it every day? Asked Jackson. Yes, Father. Mom blends it up in my morning smoothie and watches me drink it. Moira grabbed the prescription bottle from her father. Sergio, please pass Moira the bottled water from up front, Jackson asked. Sergio reached into the cup holder and handed it to Moira. Moira rolled her eyes as she opened up the small white bottle and examined the little blue pills. She placed them on her tongue, unscrewed the cap on the bottled water, and allowed the cold liquid to chase the pills down her throat. Jackson gently clutched her face between his large hands. Open your mouth and lift your tongue, Jackson commanded. Moira obeyed her father's instruction. Jackson examined her mouth. Once there was no evidence of any medicine, he removed his hand, picked up his newspaper, and returned to reading the business section. And don't vomit it up like last time, Jackson instructed. Moira handed Sergio the remaining water and sat in her seat, her arms folded across her chest. She peered out of her window at the people trick-or-treating with their families. She enjoyed how one little girl's father held her hand as they crossed the street. It was reminiscent of her childhood. Jackson silently observed Moira as she looked out the window. He pondered on a few words before speaking. Moira, I do my best given the situation with me and your mother. I need a dad, not a doctor, Moira responded. The bluntness of Moira's words created an invisible barrier between her and her father. Jackson sought the perfect collection of words, but could not translate his feelings of inadequacy into anything that would improve the atmosphere. He reached over and rubbed Moira's hand, but as soon as she felt his touch, she balled her fist. He gently caressed it, and after a few gentle rubs, she opened up her hand and let her father hold it. We have arrived, Miss Moira. Thanks, Sergio, Moira responded. Moira gathered her belongings and waited for Sergio to open the door. As she released her father's hand and exited the vehicle, Jackson noticed that Maura had a cut on her right hand. "What happened?" Jackson asked.
"I cut myself with my compact mirror. It's nothing, really,"
Maura lied. Jackson reached in his pocket and took out a few $100 bills from a large wad of cash. "Will this cover a new one?" Jackson asked. Maura gave her father a long, hard look and accepted the cash. She turned toward Sergio and placed it in his hand.
"Thank you for opening my door," she replied.
"I can't accept this, Miss Maura," Sergio replied.
"Buy your daughter Casey something memorable with it,"
Maura instructed. "Thank you," he replied. Maura responded with a smile. She shook her head at her father and slammed the door. Maura walked up the stone pathway toward her beautiful 2-story home. It was a contemporary-style home with lots of glass windows. In the center of the yard was a crystal fountain the birds used as their bird bath when dry outside. Multicolored leaves decorated the yard and chrysanthemum bushes aligned both sides of the walkway. She turned around and watched as Sergio walked back toward the SUV. Once he was in the car, Maura ran toward the back of the house. It was the only way she could ensure that she wouldn't run into her mother, who would definitely punish her for having on makeup. Maura took out her key, opened the door, and entered her home. She opened the curtain next to the back door and watched as her father's black-on-black Range drove out of their gated community.
"He gets on my nerves,"
she whispered to herself. As she looked out the window, a childish girl of about 8 years old wearing a ballerina costume caught her attention. The little girl looked around to check if anybody was watching and then reached into another boy's bag and stole a handful of his candy. She looked up and caught Maura watching her from the window. The naughty girl dropped his candy in her bag and then looked back at Maura. She raised her small hand toward her mouth and placed her index finger against her lips as a sinister grin formed across her face.